Some courtroom moments are shocking, but every now and then, a case unfolds that leaves even the judge speechless. And what's even more unbelievable is that these moments didn't happen once, they happened again and again in trials across the country. Behind each story is someone who walked into a courtroom thinking they had everything under control, only for the truth, the evidence, or their own behavior to blow the doors wide open. Today, we're diving into cases where the unexpected didn't just happen, it took over. He walked into the courtroom like he had nothing to lose, but no one expected what he was about to admit. Before the trial even began, people only knew him as a repeat offender, someone who'd already spent years behind bars and came out angrier than when he went in. But the moment he took the stand, everything shifted. His voice never cracked, his face barely moved, and he spoke about the crime as if he were reading a grocery list. He described how he'd targeted a home, confronted the woman inside, and dragged her into a nightmare she never escaped. And when the prosecution asked why he did it, he didn't try to hide behind excuses. He blamed everyone but himself, the system, the government, even the people trying to help him. Then, in a moment that sent a chill through the room, he admitted what everyone feared. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he didn't regret any of it. The courtroom stayed completely still as he finished speaking. No emotion, no apology, just a man who believed the world had pushed him too far, and that someone else needed to pay for it. But the next case proves that sometimes the person sitting in front of the judge isn't dangerous at all, they're innocent. He was only a kid when police dragged him into an interrogation room, barely old enough to understand what was happening, yet suddenly accused of a murder he didn't even witness. At just 14, he was thrown into a system that treated him like a grown criminal, not a terrified teenager. Detectives claimed they had their guy, but the truth was buried under pressure, misconduct, and a lineup that never should have happened. Years passed, then decades. While other teenagers were learning to drive or finishing school, he was sitting in a prison cell, repeating the same words over and over. I didn't do this. And he never stopped fighting. Not during the 16 years behind bars. Not during the 11 years on parole. Not even when the odds looked impossible. Everything changed when the truth finally cracked open. A key witness admitted the detective pushed him to pick a face that didn't match the real killer. And suddenly, the case that once looked airtight fell apart in seconds. The judge overturned the conviction, and after 27 long years, he walked out of prison as a free man. But the next case doesn't end with freedom, it explodes into chaos inside the courtroom itself. The moment he stepped into the courtroom, everyone could feel the tension. He wasn't just angry about the charges, he was furious at the entire system, and he made sure everyone heard it. What started as a simple sentencing hearing spiraled into one of the wildest displays a judge had ever seen. He'd already threatened officials before, but in court, his temper exploded. Every time the judge spoke, he cut her off. Every time he was warned, he pushed harder. At one point, he shouted over everyone, cursing at the bench like he was daring the judge to throw the book at him. And when he realized the verdict wasn't going his way, he didn't hold back. The insults flew, the yelling got louder, and the officers in the room stepped in before things got physical. Eventually, the judge ordered him removed, which only made him shout louder on his way out. Even behind a one-way glass, he kept going, pounding on the walls, screaming at a courtroom he wasn't even inside anymore. By the time the sentence was handed down, his outbursts had spoken louder than any evidence. But what happened in the next case didn't start in a courtroom at all. It began on a store camera, seconds before everything went horribly wrong. The security footage looked ordinary at first, just a man walking into a Walmart like any other shopper. But a few minutes later, everything changed. That same man had already been on the run for weeks, wanted for the killing of his pregnant girlfriend, and officers across the city were searching for him. No one expected him to casually stroll into a crowded store in broad daylight. Then a police lieutenant spotted him. She walked inside with a cart, blending in with the crowd, but staying locked on his movements. They crossed paths more than once, each time getting closer, until someone quietly notified her who he really was. She didn't hesitate. As soon as she stepped outside to confront him, he opened fire. In seconds, the peaceful parking lot turned into chaos. Witnesses ducked behind cars, alarms echoed through the area, and the lieutenant was hit multiple times. Despite her bravery, she didn't survive. The shooter sped off again, triggering a massive 9-day manhunt that stretched across the city. When officers finally cornered him, he resisted so violently that the confrontation left him without an eye. Later in court, he tried to justify everything by claiming he was defending himself, even against officers simply trying to arrest him. His testimony stunned the courtroom, but the jury didn't hesitate. They found him guilty, and the judge agreed with their recommendation for the ultimate penalty. But the next case reveals a different kind of danger, one where the threat came not from violence in public, but from the defendant's own twisted mindset. Before he even took the stand, everyone in the courtroom already felt uneasy around him. It wasn't just the charges, it was the way he carried himself, like he believed the world was plotting against him. And when he finally spoke, the room went cold. He described himself as someone capable of hurting without hesitation, someone who saw violence as a reaction rather than a choice. The way he talked about life, death, and the people around him made even the seasoned attorneys shift in their seats. When prosecutors pressed him, he didn't deny anything. Instead, he explained his actions as if they were unavoidable, a response to how he thought others were coming for him. His words weren't frantic, they were calm, controlled, and disturbingly matter-of-fact. Victims' families sat just feet away, listening as he tried to rationalize the pain he'd caused. The jury saw exactly what they feared, a man convinced he was the victim in every situation, even when the evidence showed otherwise. And when the verdict was read, he barely blinked. No apology, no emotion, just a blank stare as if none of it applied to him. But the next case shows what happens when that kind of tension finally snaps, turning a courtroom from a place of judgment into a scene of raw, uncontrolled chaos. The hearing was supposed to be routine, a simple reading of charges, a few questions, nothing out of the ordinary. But the moment he walked in, it was clear the situation was about to unravel. He glared at everyone in the room, from the deputies to the judge, like he was searching for someone to blame. And when the verdict didn't go his way, everything exploded at once. First came the shouting. He cursed at the judge, pounded his fists, and refused every order he was given. Officers stepped forward, trying to keep the situation under control, but he pushed harder, escalating with every second. Then, in front of a stunned courtroom, he spit directly at the judge, a moment so shocking that the entire room went silent. Deputies swarmed him immediately, dragging him out while he kicked, twisted, and refused to stand. Even after being removed, he kept going from the next room, pounding on the walls, screaming through the glass, determined to make sure everyone could still hear him. His behavior didn't just disrupt the hearing, it cemented exactly why the jury had found him guilty in the first place. By the time the final sentence was read, no one in the room questioned it. His outburst had spoken louder than any testimony. But the final case takes a sharp turn, not chaos, not violence, but the rare moment when the truth finally breaks through and gives someone their life back. He'd already accepted that he might die in prison long before anyone bothered to look at the case again. For more than 2 decades, he woke up in a cell for a crime he swore he didn't commit, a murder with no physical evidence tying him to the scene, no weapon, nothing but a lineup and the word of people who later admitted they'd been pushed into pointing the finger at him. Yet through it all, he never stopped saying the same thing: "I didn't do this." And for years, nobody listened. Not the detectives who rushed the case. Not the prosecutors who relied on shaky testimony. Not even the courts that brushed off every appeal. He spent birthdays, holidays, and years of his life watching the world pass by from behind steel bars. But eventually, the cracks in the case grew too big to ignore. One witness finally confessed the truth, that the detective running the investigation had told him exactly who to choose in the lineup. Another piece of evidence collapsed. And suddenly the story that once seemed certain fell apart. When the judge finally overturned the conviction, the courtroom erupted. The same man who had walked in as a prisoner stepped out moments later as someone finally cleared of a crime that followed him for half his life. He hugged his family with the few belongings he still had, walking out the door as a free man for the first time in more than 20 years. His release didn't erase the time he lost, but it proved something bigger. In a system filled with chaos, anger, and tragedy, the truth can still fight its way to the surface, even when it takes a lifetime. Courtrooms are supposed to be places of truth, order, and justice. But these cases show how quickly everything can twist out of control. From defendants who showed no remorse, to people who spent decades fighting to prove they were innocent, to families forced to relive the worst moments of their lives, every story is a reminder of how unpredictable justice can be. Some people walked in expecting freedom and left in handcuffs. Others walked in as prisoners and stepped out as free men. And in between, judges, juries, and entire courtrooms watched moments unfold that no one could have prepared for. If there's one thing these cases reveal, it's that the truth doesn't always show itself right away, but when it finally does, it can change everything. And sometimes, the most shocking moments aren't the crimes themselves, but what happens when the doors of the courtroom close and the real story comes out.